So welcome back to the second Hacker Pro Tips interview. I am Peter Jaworski, the Toronto website developer. And in this interview, I'm really honored to have a great guy, Patrik Fehrenbach. Did I pronounce that right?
Fehrenbach, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, good. Really afraid I was going to butcher that. So for those listening and watching, Patrik, I've done a little bit of research on you. I've read your blog, obviously, and just looking at the notes. Ranked number 39th on Bug Crowd, which is really impressive. 83 bugs found and almost 99% acceptance rate. Again, just
Yeah.
like Ben with the last one at 100. That's awesome. Good for you guys. On the Wall of Fame, you've got Google under your belt. You have Microsoft, PayPal, Prezi, T Online, Fog Greek, Yahoo. Some crazy stuff there.
Thank you.
And I think recently, you and Ben just came out with another CVE on Apple, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Okay. So I've definitely got questions about that. But yeah, so I thought we could just kick it off with a nice, easy question. If you could tell us about how you got started hacking and finding bugs.
Well, back when I was 12 years old, my father, he used to block the internet access. Like he only allowed me to surf the internet for 2 hours or something on the weekends because he's a teacher. And he was a bit scared of the idea of the internet and stuff. And so he said, okay, 2 hours is enough. And I soon realized, well, there has to be a way how I could bypass the protection. And then I spent the 2 hours I had to just find a way to bypass my way around it. And yeah, it was always like this cat and mouse game between me and my father because he quickly recognized, okay, he's still on the internet. How is he doing that? And then he put on a new protection thing, and I always try to bypass it. And yeah, that's basically how it all started.
That seems to be like when I talk to a lot of hackers, a lot of successful hackers, that seems to be kind of the common theme. Like their parents tried to stop them
This
from
is
doing something, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
they found a way around it. That's awesome. Um, so, like from there, in terms of hacking and finding bugs and going after bug bounties, I guess my question is, when did you start? And then what did your approach look like when you did start and compared to kind of how it looks now? Do you find it was something more effective that you do now? Have you changed things up, or is it really the same?
Oh no, no, no. I think I changed a lot because back in the day, I just took every scanner I could find and just put in the URL and look back 2 hours later and see if there's anything and just stupidly shutting on the web app. But nowadays I have like this technique and how I look at things and yeah, I think a lot changed since then, just
And
to
you
say.
find it a lot more effective? So it's kind of you've gone from the automated tools to more of kind of you
Yeah,
thinking through
yeah,
things,
yeah,
right?
sure. It's way more effective these days. I wish I had the same skills back then, but well,
What would be an example like when you say that you wish you had the same skills? What would be an example of like a skill you've developed now that you wish you had? It looked like you started back in 2014, right?
I think it was 2013, but
Okay.
I'm not sure because um, I started at when PayPal had their bug bounty. I think that it was the first bug bounty I ever had. It was PayPal.
Okay.
And yeah, I wish I had the same techniques that I have nowadays back then because PayPal back then was a huge mess in terms of security. Like every form you could see was affected by XXS. You could bypass some admin restrictions and stuff, so you could really mess around with it. And yeah,
Really? Okay. It's awesome that you mentioned that because when I'm before we were doing the interview, I told you one of the things I wanted to ask you about was an early blog post. Um, when I found it, its data is April 20th, 2014, and you
yeah.
titled it "A Tale of Seven Vulnerabilities."
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and these are pretty cool vulnerabilities, right? Like you were able to get into Apache Tomcat, right? Just with
hmm
default credentials. You found stored cross-site scripting on invoices that you could just send to anybody. There was reflected XSS, and then what I thought was coolest, and I love the mime for this. I'll let people go and search it themselves. Um, it's from Tropical Thunder. If you find it, I had a laugh out loud at it. but you actually got you actually logged in as the admin,
Yes,
and were
yes.
but you didn't realize it.
No, no, no. At the moment, I didn't realize it that I was anywhere in an admin panel, but
Yeah,
then it turns out I think it was on the forum stuff of
yeah,
PayPal.
yeah. It was PayPal communities.
Genau, exactly PayPal communities, and then I realized, oh, well, I can send a message to everyone on this forum, so I have to be somehow the admin. But it turns out I think they had some misconfiguration there. I could access the admin panel without even they had me asking for a password or something.
Yeah.
And then I reported it, and they said, oh, they can reproduce it. And
Mm,
well, then I looked again, and it was somehow password protected. So,
yeah.
but it was fun to see.
The reason why I wanted to bring it up was because, and this is something that's hit me, and I'm sure it must hit new hackers as well. But you kind of you found several vulnerabilities, all of which I don't think any paid out, right? Like you were trying to pay
No,
for your MacBook.
like yeah, I wanted to save money for my MacBook, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to do it with PayPal, bug bounty money, and I went on the hunt,
Yeah,
and yeah, it turns out I found eight things, and either way they were duplicate or yeah
yeah.
or not reproducible for them. So yeah, I came out with zero,
And
which
at the end of the
sucked.
blog post, like you mentioned, like it was something along the lines of like why continue, or it was clear there's a little bit of disappointment, right? And
Yeah,
I think
sure.
that
There was a lot of disappointment. I know.
yeah,
No, it
and
was
I think that it resonates with new hackers. Like I can definitely think of a few times where I've submitted things myself and they haven't panned out. And I remember like talking to my wife, it's just a roller coaster. Like one day I'm, on a high, and then
yeah,
the
yeah,
next day
yeah,
it's like I suck. Why am I doing this? And
yeah.
so I'm curious kind of what kept you going. Like you found 7 or 8 vulnerabilities, none of which paid, but you kept plugging away and now you're pretty successful at it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's an open game for everyone, right? There's always the possibility that someone is out there with a better skill than you have, someone that is able to identify things faster and better and find more accurate things than you are. But that's for me just yeah, it's I want to evolve. Like I want to be better than the other guys around, and that's why I always keep continuing doing the stuff. Like never stopped.
Nice. So it's a bit of competition for you, right? Like
It
it's
is a
wanting to be better.
competition.
Yeah. Oh, nice. That's a good way of thinking about it, right? It's kind of like you against like everyone out there that's kind of hunting, right?
Well, it's not that kind of competition because I talk a lot to the people who are hunting there because most of them are pretty interesting people. They have some good stuff to share and some good ideas and stuff, and that's but it's more like a competition against the companies who run the bug bounty.
Oh,
So to
okay.
prove them we are better.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen that type of conversation, and that type of mentality, like in a couple of the hacker chats, right, where there's people talking about kind of put it nicely, like the intelligence levels of the developers at other places.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I don't think it's meant to be mean, but it is. It's that
No,
type
no,
of
no.
competition, right? Like it's that us versus them mentality type thing. It's almost like an ongoing puzzle.
Yeah, it's still the same old cat and mouse game between me and my father, but nowadays it's not my father, it's PayPal, it's Microsoft,
Nice.
it's Google or whatever.
And actually, that on that note, for everyone that's kind of following along with these interviews, the first one was with Ben Sadigipur, and Ben, I really apologize if I just pronounced your last name wrong. But anyway, you and him have worked together on some bounties, and so recently there was the Apple bounty. Um, so you guys have kind of have gone after Apple as well, right? Like that's another company you're kind of taking a look at. What put you on to say looking at Apple, and how do you like Apple's a huge company and I'm sure there's a lot of eyes on it. So how do you guys look to find different areas where say other people haven't looked before?
That's a good question. I think we've stumbled over the thing by accident. At some point, I was just realizing, okay, this Pages app, I think it was parsing the XML in the docx document, And I recognized I have a program which shows me the outgoing connections, and then I saw it. Okay, this Pages app is requesting something from the outside, and I wasn't sure what it was because I had my payload in these in the docx, and then I saw, okay, well, there's something going on, and after that I sent it to Ben, or then we Skyped and we had a chat, and then he said, oh, well, that's interesting, let's try to exploit it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he came with several other applications, including the mobile ones and stuff. And yeah, then we realized, okay, this one is affecting a lot of products from Apple. And yeah, then we worked on it.
Nice.
It was
Okay.
pretty nice to see it.
That's awesome. And that was kind of the follow-up question as well. It's kind of like, how do you? I've heard from a few hackers that they don't hack alone. They'll hack with a partner, or sometimes they're alone, sometimes they're not. But so it sounds like in this opportunity, you started out kind of on your own, kind of ran into a roadblock, and then you and Ben started working together. Is that like, do you do that often, or are there other times where you start out with somebody and say, let's go find this or that, or is that typically how it looks like?
Well, it depends sometimes, because me and Ben we are in different time zones. So it's sometimes like it's middle of the night and he's just waking up or something, or he's in the middle of the day and I'm just tired and stuff.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's like this. I find what I think it's an XXS, and then I write to Ben, hey Ben, there is an XXS. I think I know it. Please try to exploit it. And then he reads it a couple hours later and he's saying, oh yes, maybe we can do it. Yeah. So it's always nice to do it together instead of being alone all the time. We can share so many things between each other. And there are actually things I'm better than Ben, and Ben has a lot of things he's better than me. And so I think it's cool to work together as a team.
Yeah, that's one of the, I've had, again, going back to conversations with others, one of the things that kind of comes up is this idea, it's a bit lonely when you're starting out, right? Like it's just kind of you with the computer.
Yeah.
And without that community, it's, again, same thing. It kind of feeds into that, am I good? Do I suck? Because you don't really know, right? It's like a black box is what's out there. And you see,
it is.
Everybody's kind of like, it's that same idea as like startups, right? Like you always hear about the glorified startup, but on HackerOne, for example, on the hacktivity list, you see all the success of people, but there is no failure list.
Yeah, so, exactly. There's no failure list.
It's kind of cool to hear about how you kind of work with others, and especially talking to others on the Skype chat, right? Like I find it's very helpful because you can bounce ideas and you hear other pain points, and then same thing.
Sure.
It's
just thinking out loud to someone else, and maybe he has some ideas about how to do it, and I always enjoy it more than doing it on my own.
And because, do you find, sorry, go ahead.
No, just, it's okay.
I was going to say, those conversations, do you find they're a good way to your learning? Like, is that one way that opens the door to you learning new skills and developing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's,
and then,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
No, you can read stuff on your own on the internet for hours and see if you can apply it to this situation on that, or you just group up together and see if you both can find a way to get around with it. And while playing and while talking, you learn so much more than actually from just reading stuff that's written on the internet, and that could be right, but yeah.
Nice. And then I think a big thing for that, for people watching and viewing, is you mentioned it, you're bringing your expertise to the table, and they have their expertise, and you're complementing each other. So it's not just coming to the table and saying, it's not just gimme, but it's kind of like, here's what's out there, here's what I can provide. And then,
exactly.
Nice. That's awesome. Speaking about kind of the XSS, you and I have had conversations about it. I know I suck at it. I try to find it. I'm usually terrible at it, and I'm debating whether or not I should just focus on kind of what I'm good at, leave XSS to the others. But when you're searching for it, like we talked about one of the bigger name sites you and I are both hunting, and you found it, What do you look for when you're looking for cross-site scripting? And are you using any tools, or is it all just you intuitively looking for different areas you could drop a payload in?
Um, Speaking of XXS, I never used any tool because most of them just suck. They don't recognize stored XXS. They barely find reflected XXS. So it's mainly just me with inspecting the HTML elements and see whether I can bypass some protection of them and see, yeah, does it execute there, or is it maybe executing at another point of the site? Does it getting reflected somewhere? Yes, that's just try and error.
It's just you. And so when you're dropping it in, I can't think of the term now. Um, Damn. But essentially, so what I've seen from others when I've been trying to read and learn about this is like using, I'm going to call it a mega string, right? Like with like 5 or 6 different payloads in one string and then submitting
Yeah.
that. Is that the same idea that you approach? Or I've also seen others on Twitter, like Brute Force, Twitter handle for those that aren't familiar with them. I've seen posts with him referencing like using a 1 less than 1, 2 less than 1, 3 less than 1, and seeing if the less than actually gets rendered or it's escape. Um, Thoughts?
Well, for XXS, for me, I think it's just luck. I think if your payload works, then possibly other payloads work too. I don't have, well, sometimes I look at the source code.
Okay.
So I see, or at the HTML elements that gets rendered. And if I see that, well, I can end the statement before and inject my XXX payload to the other end, then that works for me. But I never did any brute forcing things. Sometimes I watch what kind of what you see is what you get editor they're using, and see if it has some common or public security issues, or sometimes it's just luck, or most of the time it's just luck.
Yeah. Nice. Well, it's good to know. Because yeah, I don't know, it's easy for me to go down that rabbit hole, and then I start trying to play with it, and then I think, oh, well, I'll change this, I'll change that, and then all of a sudden an hour's gone by, and it's like, why did I just do that?
Oh yeah, I know that. I know that.
Um, so yeah, we've covered off quite a bit. So we haven't talked about this explicitly, but I am curious because it's by the sounds of it, it's part of the conversations, it's part of reading. But how do you stay current? How do you learn about new things? Is it just conversations with others, or are there particular places you try to read about? What does that look like for you?
Well, I try to stay current with a lot of Twitter.
Okay.
Like I'm reading what someone is writing, and what I also read a lot of public available bug bounty blog posts, because they teach you a lot.
Right.
Like the ones from HackerOne who gets published. Yeah, I enjoy to read them and
Nice.
try to stay um, yeah, current.
Yeah, I definitely try to do the same. I found it to be an effective tool, learning from others, and
Yeah,
this is going to be a
yeah,
shameless plug, but that's what's kind of led me to the book that I was writing, Web Hacking 101. It was originally just going to be 30 examples in plain language that were exposed on HackerOne, and it's since evolved. But for me, that's been an invaluable resource, and so for people watching and listening, I would highly encourage they do the same. Check out
yeah.
those disclosed. Nice. And I don't know if you saw it, but HackerOne also had a blog post recently where they
Oh,
talked about the blogs that they like to look at. And I know I
yeah, yeah,
tweeted to
yeah.
them and suggested some, but there's a lot of great blogs there. Yours as well, right?
It is there. Yeah.
What makes you decide to um, blog about something? Like I noticed some of your posts are few and far between, so I don't know if that's just a slowdown in what you found, or is there sometimes you want to write about a certain thing? Do you write about everything, or do you like how do you select that? What makes you blog about one, not the other?
Um, well, most of the time I would like to blog about so much more,
Okay.
but there you have the restrictions by some programs that you're not allowed to talk on it about in public.
Oh, really?
And yeah, that's well, I never had the problem back in the days with PayPal. I always asked them if it's okay with them to share the blog post, and every time I publish something, they were reading it before me, and they never had anything to argue about it. But on the programs these days, it's impossible for you to publish something without getting in trouble, or at least at some programs.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. It was actually, I don't want to say, I was going to say a bit discouraging that there are some platforms, not platforms, but some programs that are immediately don't disclose anything right away, and I
Yeah,
think it hurts the community, right? Like
it is.
there are
Yeah,
people out there that are trying to learn, and it's not that the disclosure is trying to be malicious or anything like that, but I think if there's a novel learning idea,
yeah,
I think
of
it's helpful
course.
for everyone, right?
That's how I learn. All the stuff I know is from people who wrote it online, who wrote about their bugs, who explained their bugs, and that's how I learned it. And I think for me, I want to give something back to the community, and I want to share all my bugs to them because, once a bug is fixed, why shouldn't the company publish it? So if
Yeah,
they have a
exactly.
public running bug bounty program, they, well, without any user data or anything in it, just the plain bug itself, what was the problem, how did they solve it, something like this. But yeah, on some programs it's not possible anymore. And
Yeah,
that's
no,
sad.
exactly. No, and it's a good point, right? Like that's, to be honest, that's exactly why I'm doing these interviews with you, right? And I thought it was awesome that both you and Ben were kind of on board with this, right? Like it didn't take any convincing. Everyone listening to this and watching this, it didn't take any convincing to get kind of you on board with this, or Ben. It was literally like a quick one-liner, and both of you guys, the first answer was yes. It wasn't why are you doing it? What do you want out of it? What's in it for you? What's in it for me? It was yeah, I'll do it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And again, thank you.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah. So I did, you, again, talking about that sharing, you had shared a link to one of your presentations from Troopers, was it Troopers 2016?
It was Troopers 2016, yes.
Yeah. And so I wanted to reference it here because I thought it was awesome.
Thank you.
I threw it on the Chromecast and I sat down on the couch and I watched the entire thing. Um, um, the one I should throw a caveat out there for people that watch it. The only frustrating thing I found, and it's not your fault, was I just couldn't hear the questions, and so I wanted to know what you were responding to, what was going on, especially because at one point it seemed like somebody was challenging you um, about kind of the research and companies asking you to take the information out. But I should kind of caveat all this for people listening and watching. The presentation was all about your research on IPv4 versus IPv6 and
Correct.
the security that you want to have. It really should be the same security across both, right? At the network
Yeah,
level.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you want to just give us a quick rundown on the research?
Maybe quick to the questions I was asked.
Um,
What I think there was I think it was 2 or 3 minutes of silence, and I
yes.
was just listening to someone, and it was about the ethical consequences of my research, and for me, or me being scanning almost 50,000 domains, and I think at this time, um, both in the audience were discussing about the ethical consequences. And then I said to them, okay, well, there will be an extra slide for that, but yeah, it was just a discussion.
Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I figured. It's almost that point. Like for those that kind of, I'll post a link in the show notes so everybody can go check it out. It's definitely worth a watch because you learn. To me, it was eye opening. I didn't realize this was a like a new area that you could potentially attack as a bug bounty hunter, right? Like it's you're
Yeah,
looking at.
sure.
You always want to find kind of that surface area, and this to me was a brand new surface area.
It is. It definitely is. Because a
And,
lot of companies like Facebook and Google, they have already implemented their IPv6 connection. And well, maybe they did some mistakes. You never know. And like all of the other companies out there, I saw a lot of IPv6 on there. I saw a lot of subdomains on IPv6 that weren't there on IPv4. So they had an A record for something on IPv4, yes, an A record on IPv4 and a quad A record on IPv6. And I've suddenly found, okay, whoa, there's a new subdomain on IPv6 which isn't there on IPv4 at all. So you could find what I like to say is a hidden spot.
And that's
Like,
wild, right? Like that idea is you are potentially finding the untapped resource.
yeah, yeah,
And so that's fresh hunting ground. Like that's an awesome find.
thank you.
So it's like taking it back to people that are watching and listening to this, like this is one of the biggest takeaways that I had. And again, it's the biggest takeaway that I'm taking away from here is um, I can't kind of um, sell this hard enough, right? Like when you're looking at areas, you want to find the areas that people haven't found yet. And
Yeah,
so if you can find a subdomain that's fresh on IPv6 that other people don't know about, it's potential that you could be the first one to a vulnerability there, right? So
yeah,
again, check out this talk because it's interesting, and that's one of the reasons why, on the Skype chat after when I asked you, I was looking for the tools. It was because I wanted to understand kind of how you did this. But by the sounds
okay.
of it, the blog post that you had posted on Twitter, which again we can include in the show notes, you talk about it was a Python script, right? And you use the tool Nmap, and you use
Exactly.
the Alexa Top 100, and then you wrote your results to a database.
Yes, exactly. So what I was basically doing, I was looking for A and quad A records. If someone doesn't know, the A record, the DNS record for IPv4 is called an A record, and for IPv6 it's called an quad A record. And I was looking up every domain if they have A record and a quad A record in place. If so, I was taking both of them, scanning both of the IP addresses and with Nmap, and see whether I can see whether there are differences in ports of each protocol. Because what most people don't know about IPv6 and IPv4, um, you have to do your security implementations for both protocols individually, and that's a thing most people don't consider while deploying IPv6. And so there could be this discrepancy between the ports found on IPv4 and on IPv6. Yes.
Crazy. And so again, this is partly for me, admittedly, almost embarrassingly, but also for the viewers and the listeners. So when you say open port, can you be a little bit more specific about that? What does that mean specifically for you? So I know you talked about like MySQL being potentially open, and you being able to footprint what version of MySQL they're using. Um, is that what you're referring to with the open ports? Like you can find a way into the different services. So like when you found Apache Tomcat, it happened to be that that port was open, and so you could then input credentials for it. Is that the vulnerability here?
Um, so let's pretend we have like this bug bounty program with the, I don't know, something.
Yeah.
And you do a port scan on IPv4 on it, and it only reveals port 80 and 44.3, which is completely fine, but nothing else. And then you see, okay, it has a quad A record for IPv6 on it. And if they haven't implemented any security implementations for IPv6, you do a port scan on the IPv6 address, and you get back like a lot and a lot of more ports because nothing of them are filtered,
Mm.
right? So you could basically get back MySQL interface or a Tomcat server or anything else they haven't thought about because they have implemented their port policies for IPv4, but not for IPv6, and therefore IPv6 is still available for you as a pen tester to hunt. And yeah, you should look at it.
Nice. That's awesome. And then again, for people listening, one of the pro tips that I got from others in the hacker chat was once you find those open ports, there's a tool called HTTP Screenshot, which will kind of automate going and opening those ports and seeing if there's anything there, and then taking a screenshot for you to follow up on. I actually haven't used it, but my understanding is that's kind of what makes it super effective. It automates that idea, and that's one of the things that you want to do when you're testing is find ways to automate. Like here in this
Yeah,
example, you wrote your script and went and contacted all the servers as opposed to you doing
yeah.
that, right? Um, nice, that's awesome. So I mean that kind of it almost rounds out all the questions that I have specifically for you. The one last thing that I did want to ask was, do you have any specific advice for people that are starting out? If somebody was starting to find bug bounties tomorrow, what would you say based on kind of what you did in the past versus what you're doing now?
Um, I would say don't use Econetics. um, Never give up. Try to understand what you are reporting. Try to write a good report. Um, and try to be creative. Like try to do things, try to think about things others haven't thought about. I think
Nice.
that would be my advice. And yeah, never give up.
That's definitely great advice. At least speaking, like I'm only a few months in, right? And it's glad I've kind of heard the same thing from you and Ben. Um, don't give up, right? Because there are times that it's going to be great, and there's times that it's going to suck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Completely. There could be weeks without anything, and there's this one day you find this awesome bug and you get rewarded a lot and a lot of cash, which makes everything good again, makes the 4 weeks without anything past.
I'm trying to hold back my extreme laughter because that was the exact situation that I found myself in not too long ago. Like I went 2 or 3 weeks with not finding anything. I felt like a complete failure, and then all of a sudden, one company awarded their bounty on a Friday, I think, and it was like it was around $1,500. And I thought this is amazing. This is great.
Yeah, yeah,
And then that weekend, I found the HackerOne S3 buckets, and within 24 hours, they awarded $2,500. And I thought, oh, I can quit my day job. I'm done.
yeah, yeah. That's what I'm thinking too.
Nice. All right, Patrick. Well, I think we can end the interview there. Again, really appreciate it. There's a ton of information here. So hopefully people viewing and listening have enjoyed it as much as I have. And again, for those that are viewing and listening, we'll see you for Hacker Interview Pro Tips number 3, which should be coming out hopefully within the next couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.